Thank you for having me this morning, and I hope some of you can come to the Forum on Wilderness after the service. I bring you greetings from Virginia Seminary, the alma mater of your wonderful priest. You may want to follow along with the John 12 passage in the bulletin. I tend to stick pretty close to the text if I possibly can. So, as Will read, we have this amazing story in the heart of the gospel according to John. It's a narrative that's rich in theological depth. What interests me as an Old Testament professor is that it has these crystal clear echoes of the Old Testament, as well as profound prophetic fulfillments. So as we gather to delve into the essence of this passage on this fifth Sunday in Lent, we're invited into a profound understanding of Jesus Christ's mission and its inextricable connection to the Old Testament. I hope to illuminate John 12 through the lenses of Isaiah 53 and Daniel 7 and 9. So at a critical juncture in Jesus' ministry, as the shadow of the cross loomed large and Good Friday is coming, he was approached by these Greek-speaking Gentiles, symbolizing the universal reach of his gospel mission out into the world. Their request to see Jesus heralded a pivotal moment, not just in the Johannine narrative, but in the long arc of God's redemptive work through history. Jesus' response transcended their immediate request simply to see him, announcing the lifting up of the Son of Man. It was to be a kind of double lifting up, paradoxical lifting up. It was a lifting up to glorification. He speaks of being lifted up from the earth, from the under earth, from death, through resurrection, and then lifting up from the surface of the earth as an ascension. But it becomes clear specifically in the text that it's also his lifting up to pain, to suffering, to death on the cross. Glorification, suffering, death, this is paradoxical. This is a conundrum. This is a difficult mystery to work through, but it's highlighted in this text. And the text is quoting this notion of being lifted up from this Old Testament text, this prophecy in Isaiah chapters 52 and 53. Isaiah 53 speaks about this really engaging figure called the suffering servant who will be lifted up, who will be exalted. Yet that exaltation, Isaiah is very clear, comes through suffering and through sacrifice and through death. So Jesus is connecting his impending crucifixion to Isaiah's prophetic vision and clarifying that what the Gentiles are seeking is going to be less than what they're actually going to receive. He's going to speak to them about more than what they only wanted. Jesus will indeed bring the Gentiles in. Jesus will draw in these seekers, but also all people in the manner of Isaiah 53, which speaks about by the servant being lifted up, the servant is thereby bringing light to many nations. The servant will atone for many. He will make many righteous, a very universal, inclusive many. That is the coming of these Gentile Greek speakers is just a tiny little foretaste of what's afoot here as we approach Easter Sunday, as Lent is drawing to a close. So let's just spend a minute or two looking at this paradoxical nature of the lifting up that this passage talks about more than once. It's not what the audience is expecting. They immediately object to what Jesus is saying, but it is clear in Isaiah 53 and in Daniel 6 and 7. But the audience wants to know, what's this all about the Son of Man being lifted on a cross? If you look at Daniel 7, it talks about the Son of Man as sort of a heroic, cloud-riding figure who comes in and gets kingdom come from God, and it's eternal. Well, if it's eternal, the audience is thinking, wouldn't the cross kind of put an end to that? We don't understand. What's this all about? What's the Son of Man doing, suffering, and dying? Well, this is not just their problem. I think for many today, perhaps folks here today, this idea that we have to move through this pain and loss in order to get to the glorious lifting up is problematic. It's puzzling. It's troubling. Why do we have to have Good Friday in order to get to Easter? Some of us just come to the Easter service and don't even bother with Good Friday. Why make an innocent person dying so central in Holy Week? So this is the scandal that John 12 deals with specifically, directly. It's at the heart of the passage. This double sense that the passage gives to this phrase, lifting up. Real exaltation, the text insists, is not cheap. It's costly. Jessica Martin, canon of Ely Cathedral in Britain, writes as follows: "Paradise is a place of mercy and restoration where tears are wiped away, rather that they were never shed." The tears, we're not going to get beyond and move around the tears. They're there to be reckoned with. St. Patrick was forced to work as a shepherd and to shed tears, enslaved and taken to Ireland against his will. In this period of his intense deprivation and isolation, loneliness, isolated in the unforgiving Irish landscape, Patrick underwent a profound spiritual awakening to an interconnection with a deeper reality. The physical labor, the exposure to the elements, the constant threat of violence, all this suffering, all this emptying, to use a big theological word, all of this kenosis. Can you all say kenosis? It's this Greek term for self-emptying, letting go of the ego, letting go of the need to silo oneself and protect one's own survival and self. By Patrick being forced to empty himself, he appears to have found tremendous faith, tremendous one with real meaning in the world. So how's that working? So the audience of Jesus in this passage is right. When Jesus talks about the Son of Man, he is hearkening back to Daniel 7, where this figure called the Son of Man does receive dominion and glory. He does unite heaven and earth, culminating in God's reign. But you can't read Daniel chapter 7 without also reading Daniel chapter 9, where there is the same figure as an anointed one, a Mashiach, who's cut off, who dies. Both texts talk about this evil twin of the Son of Man, this shadow that's cast by the brilliant and glorious light that the Mashiach brings into reality, this kind of inevitable evil that confronts this Son of Man. And both texts speak about this evil in ways that are transpersonal, that go on for the same length of time. In both 7 and 9, it's 3.5 years. So this is important in our passage. It's one key reason why Jesus is battling against death, having to face up to it squarely and overcome it. Because this shadow, this force, is greater than any one person's ill will. It's a force in history that has to be reckoned with. And Jesus refuses to do anything but reckon with it directly. To get a feeling for what's going on, it might be helpful just to look at a brief poem from Tolkien's Hobbit. I don't know if any of you are Tolkien fans. There's a new movie on his early life that's just come out. But you'll remember in The Hobbit, that Bilbo, Gandalf, and the 13 dwarves are fleeing for their lives after running out of the deep, dark home of the goblins. And the wolves and the goblins are chasing after them, and they're getting closer, so they scurry up a tree. They're lifted up high in the tree. And it becomes not an immediate escape, but a cause for being surrounded by all the wolves and all the goblins. And they sing this nasty little song that reveals kind of this demonic force that Jesus is directly confronting, that Jesus cannot ignore. I'll just read a little of the poem to give you a sense of the evil collective force that's instinctively fueling the violence of the wolves and the goblins. It's a little... I didn't read the whole thing for the 8 o'clock service because it was so early in the morning, but by 10:30 you're probably able to hear more of it. So the goblins are singing, 15 birds and 5 fir trees. Their feathers were fanned in a fiery breeze, because they're lighting the trees on fire. What funny little birds, they had no wings. What shall we do with the funny little things? Roast them alive, stew them in a pot, fry them, boil them, and eat them hot. Burn, burn, tree and fern, shrivel and scorch, a fizzling torch to light the night for our delight. Yea! And so on. That just gives you enough of a taste of the spirit, the dark spirit, that, what kind of a dark spirit would launch into this sort of song, this gay song, and all this camaraderie as innocent victims are burning. This is a transpersonal spirit. I mean, they're not composing these lyrics and automatically just syncing up, and something beyond any one goblin is infusing them and coming through their camaraderie. It's kind of an evil mob attacking the ones who are lifted up. And it's a force, an evil force that is humiliating. And Jesus is suffering humiliation. It's dehumanizing. They're calling these folks little birds without wings, as if they're queer little things that they'd be better off not even existing. So this is what Jesus is fighting against and overcoming, this idea that some of us just shouldn't exist, this idea that we're all siloed in and protected by our own ego needs, and the only way that we can feel comfortable and safe is to attack others. The poet Malcolm Guite, who was recently in residence at our seminary, writes of there being no path to glory that circumvents the threat of this kind of evil, that circumvents all the suffering that the world is undergoing. And yet, Guite insists in his poem, nor can this blackened sky, this darkened scar, eclipse the glimpse of how things really are. I think that in Jesus' emptying, his self-emptying, he's pushing aside the things that are blocking all of our visions from the real truth of reality, that Jesus is showing us the only possible path to humankind's best reality. The goblins who are humiliating and dehumanizing Bilbo, Gandalf, and the dwarves are cut off. They're isolated from what Guite names as how things really are. But Jesus is not afraid to face up to the real reality. It's through this very self-emptying of Jesus, this rising up as something humiliated and small and emptied, through kenosis, that Jesus opens up the silos. Jesus breaks through our egoism, our self-protection. He sloughs off the buffers of self-concern and finds and exposes and lets us see how things really are in Malcolm Guite's poem. He revives our co-humanity, which is really the image of God that we were created in. Remember back in Genesis, God created the human being as partners, as a couple, as co-humanity, human mutuality, the imago Dei. The Germans have a term for this, Mitmenschlichkeit. And it's this co-humanity, this mutuality this other-centered friendship and love that we should have for each other, that is part of the ultimate reality, the way things are. And it's shown in Eden, and Jesus is burrowing back into that reality. Oscar Wilde wrote of this hidden expanse of mutuality after being imprisoned in England under the homosexuality laws of the 1890s. Wilde wrote of his pathos, his cross, quote, "By all forgot we rot and rot, with soul and body marred." The experience aroused in him not resentment, not anger, but tremendous solidarity in suffering with the other prisoners, such that in one of his famous works he writes twice to a friend, "Whatever happens to another happens to oneself." So through his personal torment, Wilde began to sense what Jesus was revealing in Jesus' self-emptying. That Jesus, in this kenosis, was finding a way to bear all the sufferings of the world on his shoulders. He was able to bear the pain, Oscar Wilde writes, of those whose suffering and dwelling is among the tombs, oppressed nationalities, factory children, thieves, people in prison, outcasts, those who are dumb under oppression and whose silence is heard only of God. So Jesus is confronting this crowd in the John 12 passage, and they are very resistant to having to deal with suffering and dying of Jesus. And in response, Jesus reveals a fundamental principle, spiritual principle, that true glorification comes through embracing humility. It comes through self-emptying. Because this self-emptying, this kenosis, deflates the ego to make room for God, to make room for other human beings, to be themselves and to have space to interrelate, to interconnect, to embrace mutuality. Our world has plenty of goblins, but they are surprised to find that their seeming victory in violently doing away with the subhuman enemies that they make for themselves, that this victory is turned against them as knights of faith submit to the violence, face it square on, but conquer it. In the words, again, moving back to Isaiah 53, just below the surface of John 12, quote, "The servant is the one who divides the spoil with the strong," not through actual violence, but a metaphor of victory and resurrection, a metaphor of Easter. The Christus Victor looks death in the face without flinching and conquers it for all of us. So John 12, illuminated by Isaiah, illuminated by Daniel, invites us to a deeper appreciation of Christ's passion, of this Holy Week that's coming up. It challenges us to see beyond our fears, beyond our silos, behind the secular buffers that we have that prevent us from touching transcendence. And in this move to see beyond, to move beyond, to let go of ego, we're empowered by the servant who's gone before us, the servant who upholds each one of us unconditionally. As the siloing and the buffering that cocoons our souls begins to collapse in this cross event, interpersonal and transpersonal co-humanity, Mitmenschlichkeit, mutuality, triumphs. As the buffers and the cocoons fall away, we begin to see just what the Greek-speaking Gentiles wanted to do at the very beginning, to see. The servant has led the way. Isaiah 53:11. Out of his anguish, he sees the light of life. In him, what Malcolm Guite calls how things really are is now revealed. In the servant, Isaiah 53 proclaims, the arm of the Lord has been revealed. We can see it. But Jesus quotes the verse. It's just right after where our passage cuts off. He quotes it as a challenge, as a question that we need to ask ourselves today, here and now. Who among us, Jesus asks, is able to look at suffering, at emptying, and see the power and the strong, mighty arm of God. May we, like St. Patrick, not despise lowliness and humility and other-centeredness, but see in them the Lord's arm, leveraging them as spiritual instruments of extraordinary empathy and understanding for all with whom we share God's image. Patrick's story is a testament to the power of that vision. Amen.